Good morning, Dan and Amy. Amy, I want to tackle two arguments I keep seeing repeat themselves that need to be addressed in only the way that we can address them. Nobody else will address them this way. Nobody else will set the record straight or provide the proper context. That's why we're here, don't you know? Mm-hmm. So the first argument is the argument that's been advanced by the Never Trump people for a while, a lot of them. This idea we're inevitably going to a contested convention, rinsing and repeating the talking point that was not supported by the evidence, and it was decreasingly so as we have moved from Wisconsin to New York to the Acela primaries, just looking at the math. Frankly, I think on this show a couple months ago, I said Trump is a movement, not just a candidate. He is going to get to 1237. There's not going to be a contested convention. And that's basically what we're knocking on the door of with Indiana's primary tomorrow.
Do you know Trump did say that over the weekend, too, when he was in California? He said, I am a movement now. So maybe he listens to the show, yeah.
Well, that's right. It's
not just a vote. This is a movement.
He's finally listening to me. It's about time. And so here's the thing. You can, at the one hand, advocate for what you would like to see happen, but also not dismiss the reality of what is happening. And that's what I've seen way too many people of the conservative intellectual set, the conservative movement set do. I'm just going to dismiss what happens. And you know what's actually happening and just pretend what I want to happen is actually happening. You know what happens when you do that? You energize the other side. You say that they're not even listening to what's happening. They don't even get it. You can at least say, I get the revolt. I think Trump is the wrong vessel for the revolt. This is why we should vote for Ted Cruz. But the idea of just ignoring it is a mistake. Now, here's the other thing, the other argument that we heard over the weekend. I don't think that conservatives should whine about the left-wing Beltway media, the left-wing D.C. press corps. It's just built into the price of electoral politics. It is just a fact.
What, 7% of reporters Republicans?
Well, right. And so the because it's a fact, you have to game plan for it. But it doesn't mean you allow the likes of that puny little who hosts Meet the Press.
Oh, Chuck Todd, the Chuckster.
Say things that aren't true. Here's President Obama yesterday reminding us about the partnership between the D.C. press corps and the left in his closing statement at his last White House Correspondents' Dinner.
So I want to close my final White House Correspondents' Dinner by just saying thank you. I'm very proud of what you've done. It has been an honor and a privilege to work side by side with you to strengthen our democracy.
Work side by side with you. Yeah, right. So just because it turned out that what was advertised to be the most transparent administration in history turned out to be the most opaque, just because the love the press had for President Obama went unrequited, doesn't mean that they were not steadfast in their role as the propaganda ministry for the left and for this leftist administration. And it was nice of President Obama to give a hat tip to the assembled D.C. press corps to acknowledge that. Now, flip over to Meet the Press and Ted Cruz and Chuck Todd having this exchange about who has advanced Donald Trump's candidacy.
I recognize that many in the media would love for me to surrender to Donald Trump.
It's not about
it
the
means,
media,
number one, that Hillary
Senator,
wins,
it's about the numbers. It's about the numbers. He may win. Republican voters are the ones rejecting you. This is not a media conspiracy, Senator.
Well, actually, with all due respect, the media has given $2 billion of free advertising to Donald.
And that's a fact, Chuck.
That is true. And if you watch TV like I do religiously, you know they always start off with Donald Trump. Even when Ted Cruz wins certain states, they start off with Donald Trump denying or that he was robbed the election. They never start with Ted Cruz ever until one time when he announced with Carly Fiorina. And that was it.
And that back and forth between Cruz and Todd continued.
Chuck, let me finish this point I'm making. Even though the media stands to make millions of dollars off of a debate, you hear radio silence from the media about no debates. Giving up millions of dollars, and the reason is your network's executives are partisan Democrats. Why doesn't every TV
You don't get
station
to just say that. Wait a minute. You don't get to just say that. It's just not true, but go ahead. You just throw your broad brushing here, and this is exactly what people hate about the media and politics, broad brushes, right?
You know what they hate about the media, Chuck Todd, in addition to broad brushes, is whitewashes. And that's what Chuck Todd is trying to do with respect to the press. So fine, Chuck, let's go to the specifics. Amy, as you said, professors in journalism at Indiana University, Lars Wilnot, David Weaver, from a 2004 Washington Post piece, just 7% of journalists are Republicans. 7%. You want to go back into more academic research in this area? Chuck Todd, whose only notable campaign experience was for Senator Tom Harkin's 92 presidential campaign. So the irony of a left-wing Democrat saying the media is in control by left-wing Democrats, of course it is. Go back to the research from Columbia professor, how the media elite vote. They found 240 journalists that ran the most influential media outlets. Now, this is a book that was published in 1990, but they look back at 1964. Every presidential election, north of 80% of the most influential journalists and network execs, all the people that control the major media outlets, 80% plus Democrat nominee for president after Democrat nominee for president. So we don't have to obsess about it, but we also shouldn't allow the likes of Chuck Todd to whitewash it and pretend that it's no factor. Of course it's a factor. And the media coverage of Donald Trump has been a huge factor in advancing his candidacy.
Do you know how those 7% of Republican journalists keep their jobs? They don't tell people that they're Republicans.
Right,
unless they work for right-leaning organizations like Breitbart and maybe Fox.
Yeah, or except they're part of an anonymous study by academics just to get the word out that we're this insular minority. All right, well, what's going to happen tomorrow in Indiana? Let's check in with our friend Jeff Cardwell. He's the Indiana Republican State Chairman. Chairman Cardwell, thanks for joining us again. We appreciate it.
Well, it's a great honor to be with you, and just appreciate listening in to your commentary there a little bit about the 7% of Republicans. Reporters.
It's
pretty incredible.
It is
That's
incredible. True. So, there's always a reason why the things are the way they are. Well, that's the reason. We have the overwhelming majority, 90% plus of the D.C. press corps that is antagonistic towards anybody with an R next to their name. And Donald Trump will probably find that out if he's the nominee. Some of the fawning coverage or, kit glove coverage of Donald Trump, that's going to change for him in a general, just like it changed for John McCain when he was the Democrats' favorite Republican before he was the presidential nominee in 2008.
Yeah, the honeymoon will be over, right?
So what about in Indiana? Is the honeymoon over for Ted Cruz, even with Governor Pence now rolling in and saying at least he's voting for him?
Well, I tell you, the movement going across our state is just incredible. It's nothing like I've seen in my entire lifetime with all of the activities happening. They're all crisscrossing the state. I think Cruz has 10 scheduled stops today, and I know Donald Trump's got a couple of large stops here across Indiana as well. And they're all working very hard to earn the votes and to meet face-to-face with Hoosier voters. So I think it's very important as we look to tomorrow that we engage and not assume everything that they're reading or everything they're seeing on TV is true with all the polls. The most important poll is tomorrow. Begins at 6 a.m., and people need to get out and they need to express and they need to vote their conscience and get involved in this process. This is the first time, for my lifetime that Indiana is going to be the deciding factor for the nominee for the next president of the United States.
I mean, really, Indiana hasn't been this politically important in decades, which it's good for you guys. And I'm glad because I'm watching these Trump rallies and everyone seems to be very civil and they're listening to what he has to say. But for Ted Cruz, I mean, this is really his last stand. If he loses Indiana, do you think it's all over?
Yeah, I think it is going to be a very tough road ahead if he does not pull it out here in Indiana. I think this is, and I think that's the case when you see the Kasich team that's decided to move on and go other places across the country. So it is essentially down to the two candidates, and I think it is the Mel Harry or this is the opportunity to either make or break across Indiana.
Have you heard any word from delegates and party poobahs in the Indiana Republican Party, similar to what we're hearing? National Reviewers reporting North Dakota, some of the delegates there that are Cruz delegates are wavering a bit because they feel like, well, if Trump closes this out, then there's not a lot of sense of me sticking with Cruz. I'll just roll in for the purpose of party unity. Is that a conversation that's happening in Indiana at all?
Well, I can tell you a lot of the conversations that we've had with a lot of the delegates that's in this process, a lot of them have been really engaged in the process, kind of standing on the sideline. They really want to hear the voice of the people and trying to stay neutral, saying, look, let's see what happens on May 3rd, and let's look at what the people have to say and let them have a voice in this. So many of our delegates, now I know there's some that has been speaking out, but many of them are standing on the sidelines, and they truly want to hear what the voice of the people has to say tomorrow on Election Day.
And do you think Pence's endorsement of Cruz has an impact?
Well, Pence's endorsement, he wanted to make sure that people of Indiana knew where he stood. He wanted to send the message of exactly where he stood with standing with his own personal convictions, but most importantly, he wanted to encourage everybody to get out and vote, saying that this is the time to exercise your right and that we all need to be engaged in this process.
All right, he's Jeff Cardwell. He's the state Republican Party chairman in Indiana. Chairman Cardwell, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro go and vote answer line.